Gameranx presents another episode of Before You Buy, that show where we give you some straight up gameplay and how we're feeling on the latest games releasing. And it's me, once again, Jake Baldino, back from my honeymoon, here to talk about Need for Speed Payback. This is a game I have a real love-hate relationship with since I've been playing it. Every time I feel it takes like a step forward, it takes another step back. I'll get to that, but have some perspective with me. 2015's Need for Speed was considered a flop by a lot of people, but I actually really enjoyed it despite some glaring flaws. Always online, cringy cutscenes, and typical EA stuff just kind of held back what was otherwise a return to Need for Speed Underground's kind of arcadey awesome shit. While it wasn't the greatest game, I thought it was a good step forward, especially now with Payback. It feels like a better game in hindsight. Payback leans into a story focus, once again trying to make you care about the people behind the wheel. But in a move I don't totally have an issue with, as a huge fan of all the movies, Payback actually embraces the whole colorful cast and antics of a Fast and the Furious movie. It doesn't totally feel like a cheap knockoff either, especially when story missions swap between characters, driving certain vehicles during heists. It's pretty clever and creative, and I give them points for doing something we haven't really seen like this in games besides like Grand Theft Auto 5. The problem is, though, the cliched characters. While they're not really the worst of the worst, the execution just leaves a lot to be desired from me. Voice acting and performance is where things really fall short. Cutscenes are almost like a chore to watch because everyone looks and sounds pretty terrible, from like stilted, awkward animations to just non-existent lip syncing. The story starts off rough, like really rough, for the first hour or so, but once it gets going, it's entertaining enough. It's basic racing crew heist revenge thing, but it does a good job at keeping you semi-motivated to play because the story driving missions are exciting and well-paced, and like I said before, at least creative. There's one gameplay issue I do want to acknowledge, but I'll save that for later. But it's also pretty satisfyingly long and varied. But if you're not into people constantly yapping while you drive, this is not a game for you. But I will say, again, points for trying and creativity. That's where Payback really makes its best moves, when it's very creatively cherry-picking the best stuff from other games. Chases go down almost like Burnout races, no joke. Like, you can smash vehicles off the road, and then the camera shifts, and then the cars flip over in slow motion with like metal and sparks flying everywhere. It's always entertaining and feels pretty great from a control perspective. What you lose, though, is the fact that these chases, often with cops, are designed around linear checkpoint races and smashing enemies off the road. You don't really get that hot pursuit feel, if that's what you're looking for. It's still fun, but it doesn't translate over to the main world either, which is kind of really disappointing. Like, random emergent cops or chases don't happen at all. That feels like wasted potential, and it's a total bummer because even though that's a flawed part of the game, it's also one of the highlights. But that leads me to the open world. Payback definitely paid attention to Forza Horizon. You can tell, because the open world is like extremely varied, from terrain to elevation to deserts, forests, slick fake Las Vegas city streets, pretty much whatever you're really looking for. And the game caters to different types of races too, from road to drifting to off-road. There are like speed traps and little objectives here, and tune-up shops and races to find and keep you busy. But unlike Forza Horizon's worlds, it still doesn't feel like enough is here. It's just kind of boring and empty most of the time, and I was pretty surprised how much I relied on the fast travel, which isn't really a good sign. But that leads me to the driving itself, which it's not for everyone, but it's extremely arcadey. I find it really fun, just with a few flaws. Sometimes it controls a bit squirrely, and it's trickier to get a feel for it for a minute, which, you know, given the arcadiness, you wouldn't think that would be a thing. But once you're good, you can pull the handbrake to make like hard angle turns and drift cartoonishly long wherever you want. It's all goofy, but it's satisfying, and it actually all looks pretty cool. But unfortunately, you get some shameless rubber banding with the races sometimes, and sometimes the game just has this weird habit of feeling like it's driving itself. I can't really quite explain how, but it's just the feel. It all just sort of takes some of the wind out of the sails, you know? But little creative things within the race, like the option before a race to essentially bet on a sub-objective to complete during the race, like staying in the lead for 30 seconds or smashing 50 objects or something like that to get a bonus upon winning, is cool. It's creative, it's different, and it's a good way to incentivize you playing. And thankfully, I like the progression of the game, mostly. You can browse and buy different cars at different dealers, but actual car customization, once again, comes in the form of earning. You unlock custom upgrades by completing challenges and hitting different types of driving milestones, which I actually found to make a good, satisfying bit of progression. I like that. I like earning the upgrades and then really appreciating them when I put them on my car. It does turn into a bit of a grind because races are ranked by levels and you'll want to level up your car to compete, but it still managed to be a grind that I kind of enjoyed, especially since car customization is pretty decent. But car tuning is a bit more of a problem. Completing races earns you these cards that have different levels and allow different increases to like stuff like your acceleration, braking, turning, etc., etc. You can purchase more, but you can also spend a currency to swap 3 for a new card or something. I don't know. These complicated card-based and weird systems in games like this kind of make my eyes glaze over because they're so obtuse and boring, and they really just feel like they're in place simply because of microtransactions. That's how this game kind of goes. You'll notice that for every bit of fun I did have, the mindless fun where I can turn my brain off, my gamer brain finds something to really kind of bother me with the game. But the biggest issue that bothered me, I saved it for last, but mentioned it earlier. In the single-player driving and heist missions, the game often jumps from car to car or scene to scene, and it's pretty seamless and cool. But the big sin is that it jumps to a cutscene almost every time you would do something exciting. Every time you crash through a building, or hit a big jump to escape, or smash through a fence, or do anything, the game decides to stop you at the last minute before it happens and show something you could have done in the game instead with a stylish cutscene, which more often just makes you feel like you're just kind of racing around and not really doing anything with much payoff. The big thing with Payback was the whole cinematic experience, but I think it was kind of its biggest failure in some ways, and that's disappointing. So yeah, like I said though, Payback can be some good mindless racing fun with some nice fixes from the previous 2015 game. I found a lot here to like, but there's a lot of the new stuff it does that I'm not a fan of. I love this series, and I'm happy it's getting good, honest tries once again, but I'm just not 100% on Payback. But if you are a fan of the series, this is how a Before You Buy works. You know how it goes. I give you some pros, some cons, and some personal opinion, and now I definitely want to hear yours down in the comments. Because listen, I was a little hard on this game, and it's because I like this series and I want it to do well. But I just wasn't satisfied here, so if you are a fan, I want to know what you're thinking. If you're a crazy person like me who's played almost every single Need for Speed game, I want to know what you're thinking. And if you're not, maybe you're a casual racing fan, I want to know how you feel. Maybe you won't ever touch an EA game. Whoever you are, let's talk about this game down in the comments. I'll be down there talking to you guys. But if you have any other questions for me, hit me up on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as usual at Jake Baldino. But thanks for coming around. Clicking the like button does help us out, but if you haven't subscribed yet, you should, man, because we put out stuff like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.